Welcome to this explainer, everyone. Today, we are going to methodically break down what is, quite frankly, a terrifying and deeply atmospheric account of a haunting. We're looking at a very specific, totally isolated event, the fatal night shift of an assistant demonologist. We're going to completely dissect exactly how a paranormal event of this magnitude escalates from just a simple, everyday oversight into an absolute, full-blown nightmare. If you've ever wondered about the precise mechanics of a demonic manifestation, well, the timeline we're about to explore is literally a masterclass in supernatural terror. Let's dive into it. So, the absolutely crucial question here is this. What happens when a demonologist forgets to secure the locks? I mean, we always tend to think of experts as infallible, right? Especially those dealing with the occult, but human error is a universal thing. The big difference is, when an accountant makes a mistake, the numbers just don't add up. When someone charged with containing malevolent entities makes a mistake, the consequences are, well, they're catastrophic. So keep this question in the back of your mind as we go, because it is the exact catalyst for the entire chronological nightmare we are about to unpack from our source material. All right, picture this. The stage is set at exactly 3 a.m. on a freezing Wednesday night. Sure, it's the classic witching hour, but really think about the isolation implied here. We are inside a sealed archive room. This isn't just some creepy basement. It's a reinforced vault where blessed and cursed objects are locked away from the rest of the world. Every single artifact in this room has a dark, dark history, and the assistant demonologist is entirely alone in this freezing environment, just surrounded by the physical remnants of pure evil. Now, within this freezing vault, the protocols were strictly defined. Step 1, secure the artifacts safely. Step 2, bless the locks. It seems so simple, doesn't it? Literally a two-step checklist. This was the assistant's primary responsibility. They were just moving through the room, doing a totally routine check of the physical restraints on these objects. But, as we established a minute ago, routine can kind of breed complacency. The account hints incredibly heavily that, amidst the freezing temperatures and the super late hour, a critical oversight occurred right there on that second step. And that oversight becomes immediately terrifying when we realize what year we're dealing with. 1971. Right in the center of this archive room sat an artifact born from a severe, highly documented exorcism case from this exact year. We're not talking about an object with a vague, spooky history. It was the actual focal point of a recorded demonic extraction. The entity attached to 1971 is exactly the kind of thing the assistant was supposed to be guarding against. The sheer danger of that 1971 artifact is totally hidden by its deception. Notice the crazy dichotomy here? It's a wooden music box with a self-winding nursery rhyme mechanism. It sounds entirely innocent, like a forgotten child's toy. But then you look at its containment measures: heavy silver chains and a glowing crucifix mark. When you have to bind a children's toy in heavy silver and brand it with holy symbols, you know for sure the entity tethered to it is incredibly powerful. The contrast between these two things perfectly captures just how deceptive cursed objects can be.
Okay, so let's actually map out the rapid escalation of this haunting, because it's wild. Notice how tightly compressed this timeline is. At 3 a.m., we have the routine check. Just 1 minute later, at 3:01, a soft mechanical melody suddenly begins to play from inside the chained box. And remember, the box is bound shut. By 3:02, the temperature just plummets, and at 3:03, a shadow rises. In a mere 3 minutes, the situation degrades from a totally mundane security check to a full-blown supernatural emergency. This kind of rapid pacing is a massive hallmark of severe demonic activity.
Focusing right in on that 3:02 a.m. mark, the environmental shift is just incredibly violent. The room goes from a normal, albeit cold environment to a sudden drop so severe that the assistant's breath instantly turns into freezing white mist. This isn't just a draft. This is a localized, immediate draining of ambient heat. In paranormal investigation, a temperature drop this drastic and this sudden is almost always a precursor to an entity drawing energy from the environment so it can physically manifest. Building on that, the environmental anomalies really begin compounding. We have that slow, echoing nursery rhyme tune bouncing off the stone walls. We have the freezing temperatures we literally just discussed. Then, the assistant's brass lantern begins flickering violently, which is another classic sign of energy manipulation. But the absolute most alarming cue is that final point. In the dark corner behind the artifact shelf, a shadow begins to stretch upward. And crucially, it disconnects itself from the wall. Shadows are supposed to be projected onto surfaces, right? When a shadow detaches and moves independently toward the ceiling, the entity has fully entered the three-dimensional space of the room. And then, this happens.
a sharp snap, followed by heavy, heavy silence. The self-winding music box abruptly stops. You know, in any horror narrative, the cessation of sound is often way more terrifying than the noise itself. That sharp snap? That's the transition point. The entity no longer needs the music box. It is out. And the silence that follows isn't empty. It's expectant. It's the horrifying moment the assistant realizes they are entirely trapped in that room with whatever just detached from the wall.
Then, the silence is suddenly broken by groaning floorboards. But notice the really specific auditory shift here. It's the heavy, unnatural creaking of wooden beams buckling under an immense, unseen weight, specifically from above. The assistant isn't hearing footsteps on the floor they're standing on. They are hearing an incredibly heavy mass shifting directly over their head, literally walking on the ceiling beams. It completely inverts the natural physics of the room. Drawn by the sound, the assistant slowly looks up, and this is the demonic manifestation they see. It's hanging upside down directly above them. The physical form is described as pale and twisted, wearing a ragged 18th century dress, which, by the way, ties right back to the deep historical evil contained in that archive. It has these black, sunken eyes locked directly onto the assistant, and a wide, completely unnatural grin splitting across its face. It just brilliantly illustrates how these entities often manifest in forms designed specifically to mock humanity and induce absolute paralyzing fear. And then, the entity speaks. A quiet, raspy voice drops from the ceiling. "You forgot to bless the locks tonight." Remember earlier, step 2 of the protocol? This is where the trap snaps shut. The entity isn't just mindlessly attacking, it's intelligent. It is taunting the assistant with their own fatal mistake. It knew the exact moment the containment protocol was breached, and it just waited for the perfect moment to reveal that it was free. What follows next is a frantic, totally failed attempt at survival. The assistant, utterly terrified, reaches behind their back for the door handle, but it's too late. The entity is in complete control of the environment now. Step 2, the heavy iron lock slams shut on its own. The escape route is gone. Step 3, the lantern flame dies instantly. The entity essentially removes the final source of light, stripping away the assistant's very last shred of sensory defense. The room is plunged into absolute pitch-black darkness. And in that void, the assistant feels it. A freezing, skeletal hand slowly wraps around their neck. Physical contact has been made. The entity begins pulling the assistant upward, lifting them right off the floor and dragging them into the pitch-black void of the ceiling. The narrative cuts off right here, leaving us with a grim, truly horrifying climax that perfectly illustrates the lethal consequence of underestimating a contained artifact. Which brings us to the final takeaway from this source material. The narrator leaves us with this direct, chilling warning. If you ever hear a music box playing in an empty, cold room, do not look up at the ceiling. It's an incredible piece of advice that breaks the fourth wall, pulling you, the viewer, right into the stakes of the story. It forces you to wonder, if you found yourself in that freezing room, hearing that mechanical melody, would you have the discipline to keep your eyes on the ground? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Stay curious, and remember, always check your locks.